Hello and welcome to What's Happening in Myanmar, a new weekly show from the Frontier Myanmar podcast family. I'm your host, Luke Corbin. At Frontier, we know how hard keeping tabs on events in Myanmar can be. And in this podcast, I'm joined by journalists and experts to discuss some of the most consequential, convoluted, or just plain interesting stories of the past week. It's Friday, November 22, 2024, and today on our fourth episode, I'm joined by independent journalist Matthew Branwusser. Good afternoon, Matthew.
Hi, Luke.
And hello to Ko Maung, labour rights activist, organiser and researcher of Myanmar labour issues, currently working on migrant worker issues.
Hello. Thank you so much for giving me this chance.
Before hearing from our two guests further, let's quickly go over some of the other week's updates. So as usual, military airstrikes have killed dozens and injured scores more across Myanmar this week. Several aeroplanes targeted displacement camps and churches and civilians directly. IDPs were killed in Pekong and Momelt townships. A 14-year-old civilian was killed in Nang Cho, and 3 others were hit by bombs and killed in Gutgai. Many more major airstrikes hit other areas around the country. Casualties are unknown. Sticking with conflict, on Wednesday, the International Campaign to Ban Landmines released a report declaring that over 1,000 people have died in Myanmar from landmines last year. That's an average of 2.7 people every day. They also said that this number is their best effort and is likely not correct, and the accurate number would be much, much higher. Then, in industrial relations, conditions for workers in the manufacturing sector have declined markedly since 2021, with many gains of the preceding years eroded or undone. Mechanisms for resolving disputes between workers and employers are no longer respected by bosses and administrators who seem emboldened by military rule. This week, a dispute at a foreign-owned ceramics and sculpture factory in Klangthaya in western Yangon led to dozens of workers being fired after they protested about unpaid bonuses. There are also reports of the factory director assaulting female employees with impunity and police threatening the remaining strikers. So Ko Maung, tell us what is happening, what happened at the Charis factory this month.
Yeah, so the Charis factory, it is the sculpture factory, and the workers from that factory started the strike inside the factory, and they start with the demands to increase the wages, also to change totally the workplace condition, to have a better workplace condition. But the strike started with when the company CEO physically assaulted 2 workers working there when these workers refused to work overtime because the factories refused to pay the overtimes of the workers. So the workers would like to have the accurate information from the factory regarding their wages, but the factory did not respect the demands of the worker, and since the 6th of this month, the workers still in strike and more than 2 weeks right now, and also right now the authority, the military, police, they also involved to solve the problem, but their intention, as far we understand, the intention is just to disperse the workers in front of the factory, because since the strike, the factory owner refused to negotiate with the workers and repeatedly trying to dismiss the leaders of the strikes, and right now they already dismissed the 14 workers. And until now, there's no solution and also uncertainty. And so I can highlight the same things happened today. This morning, there's a the shipment from the factory to export their produced item to the abroad. So to make sure the shipment is okay, the factory management bring the authority and also the township administrator and other authorities in front of the factory, and also at the same time, we're gonna know that the factory will move their items and the products So it is very important for the workers to win their demands. So they understand that if the factory successfully expose their item, so they will like how do I say, they will lose this fight to change the workplace. So workers also trying to stop the like shipment. So we can see the authorities and local authorities involved. Like they always said that they would like to solve the problem and they would like to be involved in the process. But actually, like they just would like to like stop the strike. But for workers, like it is very important, and they demanded the very essential things in the current like the situation. They need these demands a lot. So like before the strike, there's no union and no union or the kind of the collective like structure not yet organized inside the factory. But there's a like the WCC, the workplace the coordination committee. But the WCC cannot solve the problem at all. That's the reason why the strike happened. And the authority, police and soldiers, they visited the workers in front of the factory every day, and they threaten the workers. They can arrest them, but actually they did not arrest the worker. But kind of like they would like to inject the fear into the workers. But the workers still strong, they still like stand in front of the factory. And this morning there was the problem happened regarding where the export container. At the same time, the leader of a worker recorded a video, and he had been arrested, but only maybe 1 or 2 hours. And the police and the authority bring him inside the factory compound and kind of threaten. But also at the time, there are around 200 workers in front of the factory, and they demanded to release the leader. But there are a lot of uncertainty, and worker also not sure what it will be happen. But also worker trying to prepare the lawsuit against the CEO regarding the physical violence against the two workers. So this is the current situation. The authority trying to like push them to use the legal projects, the legal mechanisms, and kind of the tripartite projects, and to send a complaint letter to the township like reconciliation body. But it is very vague, and no one can promise there will be the solution. And also like workers don't believe in these kind of mechanisms too. So this is still the current situation. Worker also call for the other like, international community and also other people to support them.
Wow, thank you, Ko Maung, for giving us such an up-to-date summary of the situation at this Charis factory. A very intense stalemate with the military administration and the police firmly taking the employer's side. Now they're really trying these workers. You mentioned the somewhat useless Workplace Coordination Committee, the WCC, and that there was no union in this factory beforehand. But I want to talk about the fact that actually unions are still legal in military-ruled Myanmar. What can unions do in practice, maybe for this case or for other cases when there are problems at union factories? What can a union do in the current environment of military rule in Myanmar?
And yes, unions are still legal. So it means workers can organize union freely. But right now, already been 3 years, and like early period of the leadership, like within 2 years, the military authority pushed the unions to register again, and mainly kind of like they would like to collect the information of the union leader and their addresses. In case they need to threaten these leader. Like when we always discuss about the union, there's the issue is like the employer can use this platform, kind of that they can organize a yellow union and they can show and prove that like it is the union they have, and it makes sure the like workers can do the collective action and collective bargaining in the workplace. But actually, like when the workers decided to do the collective action or collective bargaining in the workplace, it is surely they will stop and they will like make sure to tranquil the workplace by threatening the workers leader, union organizer, and the union member. So in case of the Charis strike, so it's kind of the spontaneous response of the workers, and the um, um, Yeah, so what the union can do is like they can influence the workplace coordination committee by making sure they have a strong membership and they have a strong structure. If not, the employer will use the workplace coordination committee as a tools to influence the workplace. So I think at this moment, union can do a lot, especially in a workplace, if they have a strong membership and if they have a strong structure. If not, it's really hard. And also, I think like if there's someone or the some workplace trying to organize a union, or if there's a union, I think it is better they can connect with the other labor federation like the FGWM and MICS, and if they can connect with them and they can reach out to the international community, and also, for example, some for the garment factories, they can reach out to their brands and they can put pressure their employer from reaching out to these brands. So it is the another one. So I think two things mainly union can do. Right, another one is like to influence the workplace management and also to influence the rules like affecting in the workplace. Another one is to communicate with the international labor movement. Yeah.
Thank you, and it's good to know that there are still some things that unions can do. Now, you've mentioned the international community there, and I know that before the coup, there were some large factory unions that really had success and gained improved conditions for their workers by appealing directly to the foreign brands that, supplied their employers with contracts. Is this still possible today?
Like normally labor activists said that like there's a like a weak brand and there's a strong brand. So it means like strong brands are kind of like H&M and Mango and some popular brands, and also based in Europe. Like a lot of customers are based in Europe and US. So like if there's a problem in the factory producing for those brands, is possibly we can still use this kind of like public pressure on the brands, and brands can pressure on their like contractor factory, and they can put pressure on the factory management to recognize the union formation and the collective action of the union in the workplace. But if you are talking about the brand from the Eastern country like Korea or China, maybe Hong Kong, Taiwan, or in this area, it's probably no, and you will not receive any response from those brands. So this is not just the problem after the coup, but also before the coup situation, like same problem. Yeah. But also another one is like when we because like there was a one example last year in case of the Jaco brand, and the two workers had been arrested from the San APL factory, and there was a long negotiation and meeting between the factory owner and the brands, and also the workers representative from those factory, and then finally the military junta released the two workers from the San Appeal factory, and also the Jaco brand announced that they were exit from the Myanmar. So it is somehow also like the put pressure on the investor in Myanmar, and it means that like investor working in Myanmar are facing due to the current political crisis, and also kind of like kind of harm the reputation issue is another one. So I'm not sure, but I think the employer also will put pressure on the military management and to make sure their operation is still like going well inside the country. Yeah, that's the reason why the in case of the terror strikes, the military administration are not very like move quickly to arrest the workers. So yeah.
Right, and arrest is a very real risk, or being dismissed. And Myanmar's minimum wage has been 4,800 kyat per day since 2018. Now, there's been two small daily allowance increases of 1,000 kyat each added later, so now the total's 6,800 kyat. Now, if these wages had kept pace with inflation and price changes, economists say they should be around 12,000 kyat per day. Still a tiny amount. But, that's nearly twice what workers are currently receiving, assuming they're being paid according to the law. And then if you go on strike, you're putting that at risk. So I want to ask, given this kind of working poverty, Ko Maung, how are factory workers in Myanmar cities surviving at all?
Yeah, so very, very difficult, and very they have to struggle a lot to survive at the moment as a country. So that's the reason why a thousand of people are deciding to moving out from Myanmar and trying to find the jobs in the neighboring countries, Thailand, Malaysia, also Singapore, and also the Middle East area, are also the other options, and also. The China border is right now the another issue. But there are a lot of workers still working in Lantaya and Shibida industrial zone. So, but for all of them, the reason why they're still struggling is that there's no option for them apart from by doing the collective action inside the workplace to increase their working condition, or they have to accept the current condition of work. So right now there are also the small shops workers can buy without paying cash, but they can pay their costs and expense after they receive the wages from the factory. So not most, all of the workers in the current Yangon industrial zone, they have to rely on these jobs. One of my friends who is working in Yangon told me that nowadays a lot of workers have to rely on these small shops, and after they receive their salary or wages, the first thing they have to do is they need to pay back the debt they have from those shops. So they pay back, and most workers don't left very much for them, and maybe 20,000 or 30,000 Myanmar checks at their hands. But they after that, they have to take the items and foods from the small shop with the debt book, and then they at the end of the next month they have to pay back the debts, and there's no way and options for them to upgrade their living condition and their life, and they're right now in the vicious cycle. So this is how they are surviving right now. They are in a cycle of debt and paying back, and then debt and paying back. And so if we remember again the decision of the worker from the Charis factory, the reason why they strike and they want to change their workplace condition is relating to the way how they're surviving and the military rule. Yeah.
Thanks, Ko Maung. Now, to you, the listener, let's take 30 seconds out of the show so I can tell you about Frontier Myanmar's other weekly podcast. It's called Do Atan, which means Our Voice, and it's focused on human rights issues in Myanmar, in both English and Burmese editions. This week's episode is about the ongoing effects of the Army's conscription law and the predicament for young Burmese people staying or going. You can find it on all the standard apps, as well as the Frontier website. Now back to the show. As detailed in the Frontier Daily Briefing newsletters this week, in Myanmar's north, the Kachin Independence Army, or KIA, had several military successes in Homelin Township and also continued consolidating control of its gains in Chipwe and Tsolo. This week, taking the holdout border crossing in Kanbaiti, resulting in dozens of Myanmar military soldiers and Border Guard Force soldiers fleeing into China. The KIA has declared it plans to restart mining rare earths around Pangwa town in the area, and Chinese authorities have reportedly already offered their help. How the Myanmar army will react to this is not clear. Its strategy of bombing civilian areas that it cannot directly control may now be at odds with its reluctance to upset Chinese business and investments. By the way, if you're not a Frontier member and you're missing out on the ongoing coverage of this story, check out last week's free episode of this podcast for an interview all about these rare earth mines. Next in news with China, there's been a fluster among armed resistance groups and exile media outlets about the extended stay in Yunnan of Peng Da-sun, commander of the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, or the MNDAA. Resistance media outlets and armed groups claimed that Peng is being held against his will, but other sources counterclaimed that he's just getting routine medical treatment. This line, China's foreign ministry itself affirmed. The MNDAA remains under considerable pressure from China and the Myanmar military since its takeover of the Northeast Regional Military Command and nearby Lashio earlier this year. That occupation has major implications for ongoing conflict in the region if it holds. Coup leader Senior General Min Aung Hlaing declared this week in a regime meeting that the Myanmar military has the full backing of China, including for its post-coup 5-point roadmap leading to elections. This came at a time of unconfirmed reports that the military may be coming to an agreement with China on jointly establishing a security company to scrutinize the import and regulations of weapons, or in some reporting, to directly protect Chinese interests with boots on the ground at the Rakhine State Jiaopu oil and gas terminal and deep-sea port. In fact, just this week, amid bank closures and general unease there, many Chinese workers have evacuated from Jiaopu as the Arakan Army, or AA, continues its military campaigns to control the entire of Rakhine State. The AA has said it respects Chinese interests in Rakhine State, but the Myanmar military could be perceived as having an interest in some sort of soft Chinese intervention there, given their continued inability to meaningfully stymie the AA's advance. It's worth noting that China has also recently threatened, or suggested, similar security arrangements in Pakistan, where Chinese workers are often explicitly targeted, sometimes killed, by militants that are angry about major Chinese investments, mostly in Balochistan. In other parts of Rakhine State this week, hundreds of locals fled from Dangup, south of Jiaopu, during a lull in fighting, amid reports of destroyed bridges and AA victories in Gwa. And towards the Bangladesh border, as conflict in Maungdaw continues to simmer, there have been reports of Rohingya armed organizations working with the Bangladesh Border Guard Force to shuttle civilians over the border for high fees. After paying and crossing, however, many are then intercepted and sent right back. It's worth noting there are still an estimated 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, and still over 150,000 Rohingya interned in camps in Rakhine State. Authorities in Bangladesh claim that more than 30,000 people have entered Bangladesh seeking refuge from conflict in Maungdaw since August. This fluid border environment is the focus of an upcoming feature being published by Frontier and written by our guest, Matthew Branwusser, who gives a compelling perspective on the Naf River separating the two countries from the Bangladesh side. On Thursday, it was reported that the Arakan Army has been intercepting fishermen from Bangladesh in Rakhine State waters this month and then returning them in their boats to the Bangladesh Border Guard Force, with only a slap on the wrist for violating the Army's laws. This treatment, if true, is in stark contrast to how the same fishermen are routinely treated by the Myanmar Navy, as Matthew describes in his dispatch from Bangladesh.
Yes, Luke, I came to the border region to see how the Rakhine conflict has spilled over into Bangladesh. There had been a lot of reports about very brutal attacks by the Myanmar Navy on Bangladeshi fishing boats. Fishermen have been killed, boats seized, people detained, tied up for a couple days at a time, and almost no pushback from the Bangladeshis. So I came to Cox's Bazar, which is the main city on the eastern coast of Bangladesh on the border with Myanmar. It's kind of the center of Bangladesh's tourism industry. And then I also traveled further down the Teknaf Peninsula, which goes toward the Bay of Bengal, which spans the length of the Naf River. So the Naf River is very narrow, and that makes up part of the maritime border between Myanmar and Bangladesh. I spent time in the Teknaf Peninsula, and I found some fishermen who were on the boat that was attacked by the Myanmar Navy. I met the widow of the fisherman who was killed, and I got a sense of the terror that regular people live in on the border region in Bangladesh.
And I think that the terror that civilians live under in Rakhine State, an active conflict zone, is pretty well known by regular readers of the English language media. But we don't hear as much about how Bangladeshi civilians are fearing the Myanmar military. So what's behind these attacks?
So there's a lot of chaos in the border region. It's very easy to see all conflicts as political conflicts, but I was trying to understand the attacks pretty much on two levels. There are commercial conflicts at the most basic level. So the fishermen are also involved in other trades. The maritime border is poorly delineated. So these fishermen are using traditional wooden boats. They don't have navigation equipment. It's basically impossible to tell where exactly the border is. And it has been a common practice for Bangladeshi fishermen to pay bribes to the Myanmar Navy, either to be able to fish in Myanmar waters or, depending on who you ask, as a form of extortion payment to not be shot at. So it's very difficult to look at any one attack and say exactly what the reason was, because most of the fishermen are involved in multiple economic activities. But the recent attacks have become much more ferocious because of the conflict in Rakhine State. So in the big picture, I think, is the Arakan Army and the Myanmar Navy are trying to show that they are strong and powerful and have control over the maritime border region. And they are trying to show that they are in control because they are thinking about future international settlement or some kind of a peace process. And obviously, the Myanmar military doesn't want Arakan Army to have a seat at the table. So I think in the big picture, a lot of this can be seen as showing projecting strength. And the Bangladeshi fishermen are really the innocent victims in all this. I spoke with a man, a fish exporter, who is third generation in the business, and he estimated that since the conflict flared up in 2017, he estimated that between 150 and 200 Bangladeshi civilians have been killed on the border region. There is no known total by the Bangladeshi government. They don't try to publicize such a figure if they've even tried to calculate it. And a lot of the deaths go unreported in the media.
Do local people on the border have an expectation that the government protect them? And do they understand the dynamics of the conflict in Rakhine State and how that affects them? Or is it mostly just limited to focusing on the suffering of the Rohingya and the refugee dynamics?
I mean, eastern Bangladesh is a very poor region. There's extreme poverty. A lot of houses don't have electricity and running water. There is a lot of illiteracy. People do not have expectations from the governments to help them. The Bangladeshi authorities really lack the capacity to do very much to help Bangladeshi citizens, even in peaceful, normal, stable circumstances. So the civilians, the fishermen, they want help. They want to be able to fish in peace and try to earn a living without risking their lives. But I would say that the expectations are very low. In terms of the Rohingyas, there has been, business, social relations between the people of Rakhine and Bengal for centuries. So the big wave of Rohingyas it's new in that there are huge numbers of desperately poor people fleeing war and genocide. But I think the relations have always been there. There's always been business ties, economic ties. Bangladeshi people certainly feel sympathy for the Rohingyas. But there's also a great deal of frustration because Bangladesh is such a fragile society and state itself. There is so much extreme poverty and people are struggling to survive. There's a lot of competition for unskilled labor with poor Bangladeshis. So Bangladeshis are feeling economically the direct competition. People also understand that the Rohingya don't have the right to live and work in Bangladesh, so their only economic options basically are to do illegal work, either illegal unregistered labor or as kind of low-level dealers of methamphetamine, of yaba.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how a million extra people can get by. On the economic side of things, how interwoven is the border region with the local economy? Obviously, there's fishing, and you've mentioned yaba.
Oh, it's hugely intertwined. I mean, in a population where people are so poor and so much on the edge of survival, a fisherman will do whatever he needs to do to survive and feed his family. So the fishing boats are often the main, if not only, means of crossing the Naf River, of doing trade. So it's perfectly common for a fisherman to also transport Rohingyas, working with human traffickers, narcotics like yaba, and also legal goods. So there have been a lot of the trade routes for Rakhine State have been blocked because of the conflict. So a lot of the trade for just regular household goods, for washing soap, for food, for medicine, is coming from Bangladesh. So that has actually been, an economic opportunity for a lot of traders. This is untaxed trade, which local people told me the Bangladeshi authorities, they turned a blind eye to it. Obviously, the authorities on both sides of the Naf River are involved. The border authorities in Bangladesh, as well as the Arakan army and the Myanmar military on the other side. So none of this would happen if there weren't understandings between the authorities on both sides.
Now, there's also obviously a new transitional government in Bangladesh, as was focused on by the Frontier Private Panel event last month. So are there any new prospects by now for change in this part of Bangladesh, for the improvements and opportunity for not only Bangladesh fishermen, but also for Rohingya people there?
There's much more of a sense of political possibilities and openness and freedom than there was 3 months ago before Hasina left governments. But most people have not seen any changes. And economically, things are getting more difficult. The Hasina government had a very strong grip on the economy. And now that the people at the top have changed, things are getting very wobbly. The Hasina government was seen as ensuring stability, of course, at the cost of personal liberties and democratic freedoms. So now there's fear of chaos, but there is also a hope that things can get better. The official government line of the Hasina government in the past was repatriation is the only solution. That's clearly not going to happen in the medium-term future, at the very least. There's growing frustration among Bangladeshis. As the economy gets worse, I think those frustrations will grow. Competitions will grow. The interim government is generally seen as more favorable to human rights. A lot of the interim government officials are from civil society. They are very friendly with international NGOs. They would definitely not take a hard line, as the former government may have. There was one suggestion of some kind of buffer zone in the border region. I don't think anything ever happened with that. It's very questionable how such a thing could be workable. All the indications are the numbers of Rohingya are just going to increase.
Well, all we can do is hope that something from somewhere can marginally improve conditions for the Rohingya stuck in this quagmire and cycle of violence and lack of opportunity. So thank you, Matthew, for coming on the show and giving a different perspective from the Bangladesh side on border issues in Rakhine State.
Thanks very much for the opportunity.
And thank you, Ko Maung, for your expertise on labour rights in Myanmar, including the ongoing strike at the Charis factory. There are links regarding supporting those strikers and learning more about the situation in the show notes.
Thanks for listening, and stay strong.
And with that, we will close another episode of What's Happening in Myanmar. Remember, you can email the show at whimyanmar@proton.me, and we'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you next week.